Tanya Johnson stood at register number 4, her fingers moving quickly over the buttons as she rang up a customer's groceries. It was a Tuesday afternoon in April, and the Value Mart store in Detroit was busy with the after-work crowd. Tanya had been working at this store for 3 months now. At 22 years old, with her associate's degree in business administration fresh in hand, this job was supposed to be temporary. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Tanya finished the transaction and handed the customer her receipt with a smile. "Have a nice day," she said, already turning her attention to the next person in line. This was her routine: 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, scan items, take payment, smile, repeat. But Tanya had bigger plans. During her lunch break, Tanya sat in the small employee room at the back of the store. She pulled out her college applications and a sandwich from home. She was applying to 4 different universities to finish her bachelor's degree in business. Her dream was to work in retail management someday, maybe even run her own store. Lisa, another cashier who had been at Value Mart for 5 years, sat down across from her. "What are you working on so hard over there?" Lisa asked, opening her soda. "Ken." "College applications," Tanya replied. "I'm trying to finish my business degree at night while I work here during the day." Lisa nodded. "That's smart. I wish I had done something like that when I first started here. Now I've got 2 kids and no time." She took a bite of her lunch. "You applying for that open department manager position too?" Tanya looked up, surprised. "There's an open position? I didn't know." "Yeah, in housewares. Greg just posted it this morning. You should apply. You've got more education than most of us already." Greg Phillips was the day shift supervisor. He had been with Value Mart for 15 years and ran a tight ship. He was known for his strict rules and high expectations. At 45, Greg had a receding hairline and always wore a red tie with his Value Mart manager shirt. Later that afternoon, Tanya approached the bulletin board near the time clock. Sure enough, there was a job posting for a housewares department manager. The position required 6 months of experience at Value Mart, but the posting also noted that exceptions could be made for applicants with relevant education or experience. Tanya felt a flutter of excitement. This could be her chance to move up faster than she expected. The next morning, Tanya arrived at work 30 minutes early. She had printed her resume at the library after her shift the day before. She wanted to catch Greg before the store opened to ask about the position. She found him in the office reviewing the previous day's sales reports. "Excuse me, Mr. Phillips," Tanya said from the doorway. Greg looked up, his reading glasses perched on the end of his nose. "Yes? Tanya, right? You're early." "Yes, sir. I wanted to ask about the housewares department manager position. I know I haven't been here for 6 months yet, but I have an associate's degree in business administration and I was hoping to apply." Greg looked at her for a long moment, then removed his glasses. "You've only been here 3 months, Tanya." "I understand, but the posting said exceptions could be made for—" "Those exceptions are for people with retail management experience," Greg interrupted. "Being a cashier for 3 months and having some college classes doesn't qualify you to manage a department." Tanya felt her cheeks grow warm, but she stood her ground. "I understand your concern, but I'm a quick learner. I've already memorized all the produce codes and my register has never been short. I'm also enrolled to complete my bachelor's degree." Greg sighed and leaned back in his chair. "Look, Tanya, I've been in retail for 20 years. I can spot management material, and honestly, you should focus on being a good cashier first. Learn the basics before reaching for things beyond your experience level." The word stung, but Tanya nodded politely. "Could I at least submit my application for consideration?" "If you want to waste your time, go ahead," Greg said, turning back to his reports. "But don't get your hopes up." 2 weeks later, Tanya learned that the position had been given to Ben, a white employee who had been at the store for 8 months. Ben was friendly enough, but Tanya had noticed that he often needed help counting his register at the end of his shift. "Don't take it personally," Lisa told her as they stocked shopping bags at their registers before opening. "Greg always picks people he can control. Ben will do whatever Greg says without question." Tanya nodded but said nothing. She wasn't going to give up that easily. Over the next few months, Tanya continued to excel at her job. Her lines moved quickly. Her customers left happy. And she never had issues with her register balance. She also started helping new cashiers learn the system, showing them shortcuts she had figured out that made transactions faster. 6 months into her job at Value Mart, the store manager called a staff meeting before opening. All 30 employees gathered in the break room as Mr. Daniels, the store manager, discussed the quarterly results. "Overall, our store is doing well," Mr. Daniels said, "but we need to improve our customer satisfaction scores. Tanya's register consistently has the highest customer ratings. Tanya, would you mind sharing some of your techniques with the team?" Surprised at being singled out, Tanya stood up. "I just try to connect with each customer," she explained. "I memorize the names of regulars and ask about their families. I also make sure to thank them for shopping with us and let them know about any upcoming sales that might interest them, based on what they buy." Several employees nodded, and a few took notes. Greg stood at the back of the room, arms crossed, watching Tanya. After sharing a few more specific tips, Tanya added, "I'm hoping to use these skills when I move into management someday. I'm studying business, and my goal is to eventually work in corporate retail management." A few employees smiled encouragingly, but Greg let out a short laugh. The room fell silent. "Something funny, Mr. Phillips?" Mr. Daniels asked. Greg uncrossed his arms and stepped forward. "No disrespect, but let's be realistic here. Some people are meant to be cashiers their whole lives. Not everyone has what it takes to be in management." The room grew uncomfortable. Mr. Daniels frowned, but before he could respond, Greg continued, looking directly at Tanya. "You should be grateful for this job instead of dreaming about positions you'll never have. Not everyone is cut out for leadership. Some people need to accept their place." The silence in the room was deafening. Tanya felt every eye on her, heat rising to her face. She wanted to defend herself, to argue against his dismissive words, but she also didn't want to cause a scene or risk her job. "Thank you for your opinion, Mr. Phillips," she finally said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "But I believe anyone can achieve their goals with hard work and dedication." She sat down, her hands trembling slightly in her lap. Mr. Daniels quickly moved on to other topics, but the damage was done. As the meeting broke up and employees headed to their stations, Tanya could hear whispers and feel sympathetic glances. At her register, Tanya took a deep breath and pushed back tears. Greg's words echoed in her mind. "Positions you'll never have. Accept your place." She knew what he meant. She had seen how he treated the few other black employees at the store. He didn't believe someone like her could be more than a cashier. As Zoraine, she turned on her register light and prepared for the first customers of the day. Tanya made a silent promise to herself. She would prove Greg Phillips wrong. No matter how long it took or how hard she had to work, she would not just be a good cashier, she would be an exceptional one. And someday she would be much more than that. 6 months passed since Greg Phillips had publicly humiliated Tanya at the staff meeting. The memory still made her stomach tighten, but instead of discouraging her, his words had only strengthened her resolve. Tanya now had 9 months of experience at Value Mart, and she was determined to move up despite Greg's clear message that he didn't think she belonged in management. Life had fallen into a demanding but manageable routine. Tanya worked the morning shift at Value Mart from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. 3 evenings a week she attended classes at the local community college to finish her business degree. On the other 2 weeknights, she studied at the small desk in her apartment. Weekends were split between studying, picking up extra shifts at the store, and occasionally seeing friends or family. It wasn't easy. Some days Tanya was so tired she could barely keep her eyes open during her evening classes. Her apartment was tiny, in a building with thin walls and unreliable heat. She had taken out student loans to pay for school, and her cashier salary barely covered rent, bills, and groceries. But Tanya reminded herself daily that this was temporary. Each class was one step closer to her goal. At Value Mart, Tanya had earned a reputation among customers and co-workers. Regular shoppers would wait in longer lines just to have her ring up their groceries. They appreciated her friendly smile, her efficiency, and how she remembered their names and asked about their families. New employees were often sent to shadow Tanya during training because she was the fastest cashier who made the fewest mistakes. Lisa, who had become Tanya's friend, often marveled at her patience. "I don't know how you do it," she said one day, during their lunch break. "You never seem to get annoyed even with the worst customers." Tanya smiled. "My grandma always said you catch more flies with honey than vinegar. Besides, I try to remember that everyone has bad days." "Still," Lisa said, "you should be training all the new cashiers officially. You'd be a great supervisor." Tanya nodded. "That's the plan. The assistant manager position is opening up next month when Rita retires. I'm going to apply." Lisa's eyes widened. "You know Greg will fight that, right? He's been grooming Steve for that position." Steve was a college student who had started at ValueMart just 2 months after Tanya. He was tall, white, and played on the local college basketball team. Greg often spent time chatting with Steve about sports during slow periods, and Steve was frequently assigned to help with tasks that would normally go to more experienced employees. "I know," Tanya said. "But Mr. Daniels is the one who makes the final decision, not Greg, and my performance numbers are better than Steve's." When the assistant manager position was officially posted, Tanya was the first to submit her application. She had prepared a detailed resume highlighting her customer service metrics, her perfect attendance record, and her business coursework. She also included letters of recommendation from 2 professors and a former supervisor from her college internship. The day after applications closed, Mr. Daniels called Tanya into his office. Greg was there too, sitting in a chair with a folder of papers, looking displeased. "Tanya, thank you for applying for the assistant manager position," Mr. Daniels began. "Your application was very impressive." "Thank you, sir," Tanya replied, trying not to look at Greg. "However," Mr. Daniels continued, "we've decided to go with Steve for the position." Tanya felt a sinking in her stomach, but kept her expression neutral. "May I ask why?" "My performance metrics are higher, and I have more experience both here and in business classes." Greg spoke up before Mr. Daniels could answer. "Steve has demonstrated leadership qualities that are essential for management. He takes initiative and has a natural authority that customers and employees respond to." Tanya wondered if natural authority was code for being a tall white man, but she kept that thought to herself. "I understand," she said carefully. "Could you tell me specific areas where I could improve to be considered for future management positions?" Mr. Daniels looked uncomfortable. "Your customer service is excellent, Tanya, but Greg feels, and I tend to agree, that you lack certain leadership qualities. You're more of a supportive team player." Tanya nodded slowly. "Thank you for the feedback. I'll work on developing those skills." As she left the office, Tanya heard Greg say to Mr. Daniels, "Some people just don't have it in them. Better she accepts it now." That night, Tanya cried for the first time since the staff meeting incident. She had done everything right. Worked hard, studied, maintained perfect attendance, achieved top performance metrics, and it still wasn't enough. For a moment, she considered quitting. Maybe Greg was right. Maybe she should accept that some doors would always be closed to her. The next morning, Tanya woke up with puffy eyes but a renewed determination. If ValueMart wouldn't recognize her potential, she would find a company that would. But first, she would finish her degree. Education was something no one could take away from her. Over the next year, Tanya continued to excel at her job while completing her bachelor's degree in business administration. She graduated with honors, a fact she was immensely proud of but didn't mention at work. Only Lisa knew, and brought a small cupcake to celebrate during their lunch break. "You should tell everyone," Lisa insisted. "This is a big deal, Tanya." "What's the point?" Tanya replied. "Greg will just find a way to dismiss it." But the next day, Lisa brought in a small sheet cake that said, "Congratulations, graduate," and placed it in the break room during the morning meeting. Employees gathered around, congratulating Tanya and asking about her degree. "Business administration with a focus in retail management," Tanya explained, uncomfortable with the attention. but appreciative of Lisa's gesture. Greg stood at the edge of the group, his arms crossed. "That's great, Tanya," he said without enthusiasm, "though experience counts for more than degrees in this business." "I have both now," Tanya replied with a smile, refusing to let him dampen the moment. 2 months after her graduation, another opportunity arose. ValueMart was creating a new position, Customer Experience Coordinator, to improve service across all departments. The role involved training employees, developing customer service protocols, and handling escalated customer issues. It wasn't management, but it was a step up from cashier and would come with a modest pay increase. Tanya applied immediately. This time she requested an interview with Mr. Daniels when Greg wasn't present. To her surprise, Mr. Daniels agreed. "I want to be direct, Mr. Daniels," Tanya said during their meeting. "I believe I'm being overlooked for advancement opportunities despite my performance and qualifications. I just completed my bachelor's degree in business with honors, and my customer satisfaction ratings are the highest in the store." Mr. Daniels sighed. "Tanya, you're an excellent employee, but Greg has concerns about your fit for roles beyond the front end." "My fit?" Tanya repeated carefully. Mr. Daniels looked uncomfortable. "He feels you do best in your current role." "Mr. Daniels," Tanya said, maintaining her composure, "I've been a cashier for nearly 2 years now. I've applied for 3 different positions to advance my career here. Each time I've been told I'm not right for the role, despite my qualifications and performance. I have to wonder if there are other factors influencing these decisions." Mr. Daniels shifted in his seat. "What are you suggesting, Tanya?" "I'm suggesting that perhaps Greg doesn't see me as management material because of who I am, not because of my capabilities." The room fell silent. Mr. Daniels looked down at Tanya's application on his desk, then back at her. "That's a serious implication," he said finally. "Yes, it is," Tanya agreed. "And it's not one I make lightly. But I've earned a chance to advance, Mr. Daniels. All I'm asking for is a fair opportunity to prove myself." Mr. Daniels studied her for a long moment. "I'll consider your application carefully, Tanya. That's all I can promise right now." A week later, Tanya was called back to Mr. Daniels's office. Greg was there too, looking displeased. "Congratulations, Tanya," Mr. Daniels said. "We'd like to offer you the Customer Experience Coordinator position." Tanya felt a rush of surprise and joy. "Thank you, Mr. Daniels. I appreciate the opportunity." Greg's jaw tightened. "Remember, this is a trial position. We'll be evaluating your performance closely." As Tanya left the office, she allowed herself a small smile. It wasn't a management role, but it was a step in the right direction. Greg might not believe in her potential, but she would continue to prove him wrong, one achievement at a time. Tanya had been working as the Customer Experience Coordinator at ValueMart for 6 months. The position came with new challenges, but she embraced them all. Her days were no longer spent behind a register. Now she moved throughout the store, training new employees, handling difficult customer situations, and developing ways to improve service. She had her own small desk in the corner of the office, though she rarely sat at it. Greg Phillips still found ways to make her job harder. He changed her schedule without notice, assigned her additional tasks at the last minute, and questioned her decisions in front of other employees. But Tanya remained professional. She documented everything in a small notebook she kept in her pocket. Every schedule change, every extra assignment, every public criticism. She wasn't sure if she would ever need this record, but keeping it helped her feel more in control. One Tuesday morning in November, Tanya arrived at work to find the store in chaos. A delivery truck had arrived early, 3 cashiers had called in sick, and a line of customers was already forming outside, waiting for the store to open. "Johnson," Greg called as soon as he spotted her. "I need you on register 4 today. We're short-staffed." Tanya took a deep breath. "Good morning, Mr. Phillips. I'm scheduled to train the new hires in the electronics department this morning." "That can wait," Greg said dismissively. "We need cashiers now." "The regional director is coming to evaluate the new training program today," Tanya reminded him. "Mr. Daniels asked me specifically to make sure the electronics team is ready." Greg's face darkened. Are you refusing to help where you're needed? Not at all, Tanya said calmly. I'm trying to follow the schedule Mr. Daniels approved. Why don't I help at the registers until 9:30, then conduct the training before the regional director arrives at 11:00? Greg looked like he wanted to argue further, but Mr. Daniels walked up at that moment. Is there a problem? He asked. Before Greg could speak, Tanya explained her solution. Mr. Daniels nodded in agreement. That sounds reasonable. Thanks for being flexible, Tanya. As Tanya walked away to get her cashier drawer, she felt Greg's eyes burning into her back. She had won this small battle, but she knew the war was far from over. At 9:30, Tanya handed her register over to a newly arrived cashier and hurried to the electronics department. She had just enough time to run through the new customer service protocols with the 4 employees there before the regional director was scheduled to arrive. The training session went well. The employees were engaged and asked good questions. Tanya had created a simple but effective training guide that walked them through common customer scenarios and provided scripts for handling difficult situations. She had them practice with role-playing exercises, giving gentle corrections and plenty of praise. At 10:55, Tanya noticed a woman in a sharp gray suit enter the store. She was tall with short silver hair and carried a tablet computer. Tanya immediately recognized her as Patricia Rivera, the regional director for Value Mart's Midwest division. She oversaw 64 stores across 6 states, and her reputation for being tough but fair was well known throughout the company. Ms. Rivera spent about 20 minutes observing the electronics department from a distance, watching as the newly trained employees interacted with customers. Then she approached Tanya. You must be Tanya Johnson, she said, extending her hand. I've heard good things about your training program. Thank you, Ms. Rivera, Tanya replied, shaking her hand firmly. I've been working on ways to standardize our customer service approach across departments. Walk with me, Ms. Rivera said. Tell me more. As they walked through the store, Tanya explained the training materials she had developed and the results they were seeing: fewer customer complaints, higher satisfaction scores, and better employee retention. Ms. Rivera asked pointed questions and Tanya answered each one clearly and confidently. You've done impressive work, Ms. Rivera said as they completed their tour. How long have you been with Value Mart? Almost 3 years, Tanya replied. I started as a cashier. And you're interested in management? Very much so, Tanya said. I completed my bachelor's degree in business administration last year and I've applied for several management positions within the store. Ms. Rivera raised an eyebrow. Yet you're still in a non-management role. Why is that? Tanya chose her words carefully. I've been told I lack certain leadership qualities. By whom? Mr. Phillips, the day supervisor. Ms. Rivera made a note on her tablet. I see, and what does Mr. Daniels say? He tends to defer to Mr. Phillips on staffing decisions. Ms. Rivera studied Tanya for a moment. Have you considered applying to our management training program? It's for employees with potential to move into store management and beyond. We're always looking for candidates with your kind of initiative. Tanya felt a surge of hope. I wasn't aware of the program. That's strange, Ms. Rivera said. Store managers are supposed to identify promising employees and encourage them to apply. She handed Tanya her business card. The next cohort starts in January. The application deadline is in 2 weeks. I'd be interested to see what you could do with proper support and training. As Ms. Rivera walked away to meet with Mr. Daniels, Tanya stared at the business card in her hand. This could be her chance to move beyond Greg's influence and truly begin her career in retail management. Later that afternoon, Tanya was restocking the customer service desk when she overheard Greg talking to Steve in the nearby office. Rivera was asking about management candidates, Greg said. I told her you're the obvious choice for the next assistant manager opening. Thanks, Greg, Steve replied. I appreciate the support. Just make sure you apply for that training program. It's a fast track to store management. Tanya gripped the stack of return forms in her hands tightly. So Greg had known about the management training program all along. He had just never mentioned it to her. That evening, Tanya stayed up late working on her application for the management training program. She included her resume, college transcripts, and a detailed cover letter explaining her passion for retail management and her vision for improving the customer experience. She also included metrics showing the improvements in customer satisfaction since she had implemented her training program. 2 days later, Greg called Tanya into the office. He closed the door behind her, his face tight with anger. "Ms. Rivera called me yesterday," he said without preamble. "She wanted to know why I hadn't recommended you for the management training program." Tanya said nothing, waiting for him to continue. "Did you say something to her about me?" Greg demanded. "I simply answered her questions honestly," Tanya replied. "She asked why I was still in a non-management role despite my qualifications." Greg leaned forward across his desk. "Look, Tanya, I've been in this business a long time. I know what it takes to succeed in management. You're good with customers, I'll give you that. But you don't have what it takes to lead a team or run a store." "With all due respect, Mr. Phillips, I disagree," Tanya said, meeting his gaze steadily. "And I've applied to the management training program to prove it." Greg's face flushed. "You're wasting your time. Even if you get in, which you won't, you'll wash out within a month. Some people just aren't cut out for leadership positions." "I guess we'll find out," Tanya said, rising from her chair. "Is there anything else you needed to discuss?" Greg waved her away dismissively. "Just don't come crying to me when you fail." As Tanya left the office, she felt lighter than she had in months. For the first time since she started at Value Mart, she saw a clear path forward that didn't depend on Greg's approval. 2 weeks later, Tanya received an email from Value Mart's corporate office. She had been accepted into the management training program starting in January. The email included congratulations from Patricia Rivera herself, who wrote that Tanya's application was one of the strongest she had seen in years. When Tanya shared the news with Mr. Daniels, he seemed genuinely pleased. For her, "You'll be missed here," he said, "but this is a great opportunity." Word spread quickly throughout the store. Most of her coworkers congratulated her warmly. Lisa hugged her tightly and made her promise to stay in touch. Even Steve offered a handshake and a "good for you." Only Greg remained cold, muttering that the program was probably just looking to fill quotas. When Tanya overheard him saying this to another supervisor, she simply smiled to herself and walked away. His words couldn't hurt her anymore. She had proven him wrong, and she was just getting started. The first day of the management training program arrived cold and snowy. Tanya woke up 2 hours early to make sure she would get to the Value Mart corporate office on time despite the weather. She had ironed her new navy blue blazer the night before and laid out her entire outfit. This was the opportunity she had been working toward for years, and she was determined to make the most of it. The Value Mart corporate headquarters was located in a glass office building downtown. Tanya had never been there before. She walked through the revolving door into a large lobby with marble floors and a huge Value Mart logo on the wall. A security guard checked her name against a list and directed her to the 11th floor. When the elevator doors opened, Tanya found herself in a hallway with 15 other people around her age. They all wore similar professional clothes and nervous expressions. A young man with glasses approached her. "First day too?" he asked with a friendly smile. "Yes," Tanya replied. "I'm Tanya Johnson from Store 342 in Detroit." "Nick Patel," he said, shaking her hand. "Store 287 in Chicago. What position did you have before this?" "Customer Experience Coordinator," Tanya said. "Before that, I was a cashier." Nick raised his eyebrows. "Wow, that's quite a jump. Most people here were at least assistant managers." Before Tanya could respond, the doors at the end of the hallway opened, and Patricia Rivera walked out. The group fell silent. "Good morning," Ms. Rivera said. "Welcome to Value Mart's management training program. Over the next 6 months, you will learn every aspect of running a successful retail operation. This program is challenging, and not everyone will complete it, but those who do will be on the fast track to store management and beyond." She led them into a large conference room with a U-shaped table. Name cards marked each person's seat. Tanya found hers between Nick and a woman named Kelly from Cincinnati. Ms. Rivera introduced the program directors and outlined what they would be learning: inventory management, staffing, budgeting, loss prevention, and more. They would spend 3 days each week in the classroom and 2 days in different Value Mart locations, getting hands-on experience in various departments. "Any questions before we begin?" Ms. Rivera asked. A man at the other end of the table raised his hand. "I heard only half of each cohort makes it to graduation. Is that true?" Ms. Rivera's expression remained neutral. "The completion rate varies. We set high standards because running a store is a big responsibility. Those who put in the work and demonstrate leadership potential will succeed. Now let's get started." The first few weeks were intense. Tanya spent her evenings studying materials and preparing for the next day's sessions. The coursework was challenging, covering everything from financial forecasting to employee psychology. Some of her classmates had business degrees from prestigious universities or years of management experience. Tanya sometimes felt out of her depth, but she never showed it. During the store visits, they shadowed managers in different departments. Tanya excelled in these practical sessions. Her years on the front lines had given her insights that many of her classmates lacked. She understood how small operational changes could affect the daily work of cashiers and stockers. Her suggestions were practical and often won praise from the store managers they worked with. 3 months into the program, they were assigned to complete a major project, develop a plan to improve a struggling store's performance. They were divided into teams of 4, with each team assigned a different store. Tanya's team was given store 418, which had the lowest customer satisfaction scores in the region. "First, we need to understand why their scores are so low," Tanya said during their first team meeting. "Let's analyze their customer complaints from the last 6 months." Her teammates agreed and they divided up the work. Nick would look at staffing levels, Kelly would examine inventory issues, Alex would check for equipment problems, and Tanya would analyze the customer service data. When they reconvened a week later, patterns emerged. The store was chronically understaffed during peak hours. The checkout equipment was outdated and frequently broke down, and customer service training was inconsistent across departments. "We need a comprehensive approach," Tanya said. "It's not just one thing going wrong, it's several issues feeding into each other." They worked late into the evenings developing their plan. Tanya contributed her training materials from her time as customer experience coordinator. Nick created a new staffing model. Kelly identified inventory systems that needed updating, and Alex designed a maintenance schedule for the equipment. When it came time to present their findings to the program directors, Tanya's team chose her to lead the presentation. She was nervous but prepared. She walked the directors through their analysis and recommendations, answering questions with confidence and clarity. The next day, Ms. Rivera called Tanya into her office. "Your presentation yesterday was impressive," she said. "The directors were particularly struck by your understanding of how different aspects of store operations affect each other." "Thank you," Tanya replied. "It's something I noticed as a cashier. When one part of the system breaks down, it affects everything else." "That's exactly right," Ms. Rivera said, "and it's the kind of insight that makes a good manager. Your team's recommendations will be implemented at store 418 next month." Tanya couldn't help but smile. "Really? That's wonderful." "There's more," Ms. Rivera continued. "We'd like you to oversee the implementation. You'll work with the store manager to put your plan into action. It's an additional responsibility on top of your regular program requirements, but it's also an opportunity to prove yourself in a real management situation. I won't let you down," Tanya promised. For the next month, Tanya split her time between the training program and store 418. She worked closely with the store manager, a woman named Diane who had been with Value Mart for 20 years but was struggling with the changing retail landscape. At first, Diane was resistant to the new ideas, but as she saw Tanya's genuine desire to help rather than criticize, she became more open. Together, they reorganized the staffing schedule, implemented the new training program, and set up regular maintenance for the checkout equipment. Tanya took care to explain the reasoning behind each change, helping the employees understand how these adjustments would make their jobs easier. By the end of the month, Customer complaints had decreased by 23%, and employee call-outs were down by 15%. It wasn't a complete turnaround yet, but it was significant progress. When Tanya presented the results to the program directors, they were clearly impressed. As the training program entered its final month, the participants were evaluated for potential placements after graduation. Some would become assistant managers, others would be placed in specialized roles at the corporate office, and a select few would be fast-tracked to store manager positions. Tanya was working late one evening, finalizing her final project, when Nick stuck his head into the study room. "Have you heard the rumors?" he asked, dropping into the chair across from her. "What rumors?" Tanya asked, looking up from her laptop. "About the placements. Word is they're considering you for the store manager position at 418. Tanya's heart raced. That can't be right. They don't put new graduates directly into store manager roles. Normally, no, Nick agreed. But apparently Diane is retiring and the store's performance has improved so much under your guidance that they're thinking about making an exception. That's just a rumor, Tanya said, trying not to get her hopes up. I'll believe it when I hear it from Ms. Rivera. The next day, Tanya was called into a meeting with Ms. Rivera and the program's executive director, Mr. Nelson. They sat her down and reviewed her performance throughout the program. You've consistently exceeded expectations, Mr. Nelson said. Your technical skills are strong, but more importantly, you have a natural ability to lead and inspire others. We've made a decision about your placement after graduation, Ms. Rivera added. It's unusual, but we believe it's the right choice given your unique talents and the circumstances. Tanya held her breath. We'd like to offer you the position of store manager at store 418, Mr. Nelson said. Diane has requested early retirement and she specifically recommended you as her replacement. She said she's learned more from you in 1 month than from anyone else in her 20 years with the company. Tanya was speechless for a moment. I'm honored, she finally managed to say. And a bit overwhelmed. Do you really think I'm ready? We wouldn't offer if we didn't, Ms. Rivera said firmly. You've proven yourself at every stage of this program. The store is already responding to your leadership, and you'll have support from the regional team, including me. Then I accept, Tanya said, her voice steady despite the emotion swirling inside her. Thank you for this opportunity. I won't let you down. As she left the meeting, Tanya thought about how far she had come from that day 3 years ago when Greg Phillips had laughed at her ambitions and told her she would never be more than a cashier. Now she was about to become the youngest store manager in the region. She hadn't seen Greg since leaving for the management program, but she wondered what he would say when he heard the news. More importantly, she wondered how many other talented employees were being held back by people like him, people who couldn't see past their own biases to recognize potential. 5 years had passed since Tanya Johnson graduated from the management training program and took over as manager of Store 418. Under her leadership, the once struggling location had transformed into one of the top-performing stores in the entire Value Mart chain. Customer satisfaction scores were consistently in the top 10% company-wide, employee turnover had dropped to half the company average, and sales increased year after year. Tanya had developed a reputation throughout the region as a manager who brought out the best in her team. She knew every employee by name and made it a point to understand their strengths, challenges, and career goals. When she saw potential in someone, she mentored them and created opportunities for growth. 6 of her former employees had gone on to management positions in other Value Mart locations. On a personal level, Tanya's life had changed dramatically as well. Her salary as a store manager allowed her to move into a comfortable apartment in a nicer neighborhood. She had paid off her student loans and even purchased a small but reliable car. Last year, she had completed her MBA through Value Mart's Education Assistance Program, studying on weekends and evenings just as she had done years before. Throughout her success, Tanya never forgot her difficult early years at Value Mart. She kept the small notebook in which she had documented Greg Phillips's attempts to hold her back, not out of bitterness, but as a reminder of how important it was to recognize and nurture talent in all its forms. One morning in May, Tanya received an unexpected call from Patricia Rivera, who had been promoted to Executive Vice President of Operations for the entire company. Tanya, how are you? Ms. Rivera asked warmly. Very well, thank you, Tanya replied. It's good to hear from you. I have some news I wanted to share with you personally, Ms. Rivera said. I'm retiring at the end of this year. Congratulations on your retirement, Tanya said, though the company will certainly miss your leadership. That's actually related to why I'm calling. Before I leave, I'm reorganizing the regional management structure. We're creating a new position, Regional Director of Operations for the Midwest Division. The role will oversee all 64 stores in the region, with a focus on implementing the customer-centered approach you've pioneered at your store. Tanya's heart began to race. That sounds like an important position. It is, Ms. Rivera agreed. And you're my top candidate for the job. For a moment, Tanya couldn't speak. Regional Director was several levels above store manager, a position typically held by people with 15 or 20 years of experience. She had achieved so much in her 5 years as a store manager, but this was beyond anything she had imagined at this stage of her career. I'm honored, she finally said, but isn't this a bit unusual? There must be more experienced candidates. Experience isn't just about time, Ms. Rivera replied. It's about results and vision. Your store isn't just successful in terms of numbers. You've created a model that we want to replicate across the region. The executive team has unanimously approved my recommendation. The job is yours if you want it. I do want it, Tanya said firmly. Thank you for your confidence in me. Excellent. You'll start in July, which gives you time to train your replacement at 418. And Tanya, your first assignment will be to evaluate all the stores in the region, including Store 342. Store 342, her original store where Greg Phillips still worked as a day supervisor. Tanya hadn't set foot there since she left for the management training program. I understand, she said. I'll conduct a fair and thorough evaluation of all locations. After the call ended, Tanya sat at her desk for a long time, thinking about how far she had come from that day when Greg had publicly humiliated her and told her she would never be more than a cashier. Now she would be returning as his boss. Not just his boss, but his boss's boss's boss. The next 2 months were a whirlwind of activity. Tanya selected and trained her assistant manager, Sophia, to take over Store 418. She attended orientation sessions at the corporate office to prepare for her new role. She studied reports on all 64 stores in her region, identifying patterns and areas for improvement. Finally, the day came for her first official visit as regional director. Tanya chose Store 342 as her first stop. She wanted to get it over with, but she also saw it as symbolic, beginning her new journey where her old one had started. She dressed carefully that morning in a tailored gray suit with the gold Value Mart pin that designated regional leadership on her lapel. Her hair was styled in a neat professional bun, and she carried a tablet computer loaded with store performance data. When she walked through the doors of Store 342, a flood of memories washed over her. The layout had changed somewhat, and many of the faces were new, but the familiar smell of the store and the sound of registers beeping took her right back to her days as a cashier. She introduced herself to the current store manager, a man named Alan who had transferred from another location 2 years ago. He seemed nervous but eager to show her around. As they walked the aisles, Tanya noticed several issues: shelves that needed restocking, outdated signage, cashiers who didn't greet customers. Your customer satisfaction scores have been declining for the past 3 quarters, Tanya noted as they continued their tour. What do you think is causing that? Alan hesitated. Honestly, morale has been an issue. We've had trouble retaining good employees, especially on the front end. As they rounded the corner to the grocery department, Tanya spotted a familiar figure. Greg Phillips was instructing a young employee on how to arrange a display. He looked older, his hair now completely gray, but his posture and manner were unmistakable. For a moment, Tanya considered avoiding him or sending Alan to bring him over. But that wasn't the kind of leader she was. She walked directly toward him. Mr. Phillips, she said, extending her hand. It's been a while. Greg turned, confusion crossing his face before recognition dawned. His eyes widened as he took in her professional attire and the regional director pin. Tanya, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. It's Director Johnson now, she replied calmly. I'm the new Regional Director of Operations for the Midwest Division. I'm conducting an evaluation of all stores in the region, starting with this one. Greg's face paled as he shook her hand weakly. Congratulations on your success. Thank you, Tanya said. I'd like to speak with you after I finish my tour with Alan. Would you be available in about an hour? Greg nodded silently, still looking stunned. The rest of the tour confirmed Tanya's suspicions. Store 342 had significant problems with employee morale and customer service. When she finally sat down with Greg in the store's small conference room, she got straight to the point. The front-end team seems particularly disengaged, she said. As day supervisor, that falls under your responsibility. Can you tell me what steps you're taking to improve morale and service quality? Greg shifted uncomfortably in his seat. We have the standard training protocols, and I monitor performance closely. Perhaps too closely, Tanya suggested. I noticed several employees seemed tense around you, and Alan mentioned high turnover rates. Greg stared down at the table. My management style has always been direct. Some people can't handle high expectations. Or perhaps, Tanya said gently, some managers can't recognize potential when it doesn't look like what they expect. Greg's head snapped up, his eyes meeting. Hers. In that moment, Tanya saw recognition in his face, not just of who she was, but of what he had done over the years, not just to her, but potentially to many others. I was wrong about you, he said quietly. Obviously. It wasn't just about me, Tanya replied. How many other capable employees have you discouraged over the years? How much talent has this store lost because you couldn't see beyond your own biases? Greg had no answer. I'm implementing a new employee development program across all stores. In the region, Tanya continued, it focuses on identifying and nurturing talent at all levels, regardless of background or current position. Store 342 will be one of the first locations to adopt it. She stood up. I expect your full cooperation with this initiative, Mr. Phillips. Every employee deserves the chance to reach their full potential. That's not just good for them. It's good for the entire company. As Tanya left the conference room, she felt no triumph or vindication, only a quiet certainty that she was doing what needed to be done. She wasn't there to punish Greg or to prove him wrong. She was there to fix a broken system and to ensure that no other employee with potential would be told they couldn't be more than what someone else decided they should be. Over the next year, Tanya's employee development program transformed stores across the region. Promising employees from diverse backgrounds were identified and mentored. New training protocols emphasized respect and inclusion. Managers were evaluated not just on sales figures, but on how well they developed their teams. And Greg Phillips? He transferred to a smaller store 6 months after Tanya's visit, taking a voluntary demotion to a non-supervisory role. The last Tanya heard, he was working as a grocery clerk, quietly doing his job without the authority to shape anyone else's future. When Tanya thought about Greg now, she felt neither anger nor satisfaction. She simply hoped that he had learned what she had known all along, that potential comes in all forms and true leadership means helping others rise, not holding them down.